Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today. Today, we are going to spend some time reviewing the new application. We are going to start off by going through each page and update, pointing out some new questions and also some shifting of information. The new application was created by both Fannie and Freddie. They worked together on this new application for, I think it's been in the process for about 6 years. When they created it, they tried to give it the same look and feel as the LE and CD. That was by intent because they wanted to make sure that the borrower had a consistent, uniform design when they review the documentation. The new application is broken down into what I like to call two parts. The first part reviews all the borrower information, and that actually has 9 different subsections, which we'll review. Part 2 is the lender loan information, and that part has 4 subsections, which we will review as well. Jumping right into section 1 is the borrower information. As you will see, it collects all the borrower's data up front, such as name, social security number, and date of birth. You will notice here that the citizenship is collected right within this section as it's been removed from the declarations questions. The borrower will indicate what type of credit they've applied for, joint or individual. I do want to point out that if you have joint borrowers on an application, if you're pulling joint credit and they share financial data such as assets, liabilities, and real estate owned, there will be one complete application for the borrower and then an additional borrower information sheet. The purpose of that is to not duplicate information. If you have 2 borrowers that do not share that financial data, each borrower will have its own application. There will be nothing special that you have to do in the system to separate that. It will be based on how you pull credit, and it will do it for you automatically and separate the application. We're going to collect the marital status. One new update here is the unmarried. If you select that for your borrower in the application, an unmarried addendum will be available for us to complete. This is only designed for those states that recognize civil unions or domestic partnerships. So if it doesn't apply to the state that you're transacting in, you would simply just bypass that area of the application. If it does apply, you'll complete it and it prints later on in the application. You'll see that the application now includes the section to pull in 3 phone numbers for the borrower and an email address. It moves into collecting current address information, previous address information if it's applicable, if they hadn't had a 2-year history, and then mailing address if it's also applicable. As you see as we move through the application, if there's a check mark in this box, and if it doesn't apply to the borrower, that section of the application will be collapsed. Moving into section 1B, this is for current employment and self-employment income. Looks a little bit different for us, but it's the same data for the most part. We're going to collect the borrower's employer information or business name, their position. We're collecting the start date and how many years they've been in this line of work. Now, right within this section, we have the borrower's self-employment indicator. So if the borrower is self-employed, that would be check marked. The application will also denote if the borrower has less than 25% interest in the business or 25% or more. One new question for us is this disclaimer from the borrower indicating if they are employed by a family member, seller to the property, real estate agent, or any other party that has an interest in the transaction. If your borrower's income is derived from self-employment, you'll see when you type into the application itself, their monthly income or loss will show in this section. Their monthly gross income, if it's not from self-employment, will show on the right-hand side here. Section 1C is reserved for additional current employment or additional self-employment income. Section 1D would be reserved for previous employment information if the borrower did not provide a current 2-year history. Section 1E is reserved for income from other sources. So this is where you're going to list out your Social Security, retirement, child support, public assistance. We're just going to list out the income source here on the left-hand side, and the monthly income will print on the right-hand side. As we move into section 2, we'll see that we're collecting the borrower's financial data, so assets and liabilities. The very first section 2A will collect current bank accounts, retirement accounts, and other accounts that the borrower may have. The application is going to pull the information based on how you list out the assets, so your checking and savings, the financial institution that they have them with, account number, and the cash or market value is printed on the right-hand side. As we move into 2B, we'll see that this is reserved for other assets and credits you may have. So the first section for other assets, it could be the sale of real estate property that's going to be sold on or prior to closing. We also have proceeds from the sale of non-real estate. We have secured borrow funds and unsecured borrowed funds. Credits, this section of the application is going to collect your earnest money deposit, rent credits, and your sweat and trade equities. Again, it's just going to list out the type in this section and put the estimated value on the right-hand side. As we move into section 2C, this is going to collect all the liability information. This is what's imported from the credit report. So it's going to pull over the type, the company name, the creditor name, account number, unpaid balance, and monthly payment. If your transaction is paying off one of these liabilities, there will be an X indicator in the square field. Section 2 is now going to collect other liabilities and expenses. So removed from the declarations page is alimony, child support, and separate maintenance. If we have any other liabilities that the borrower needs to disclose, it would be collected in this section as well. It's simply going to list out the account type and the monthly obligation. Section C is financial information for real estate owned. I'm going to pop over to this PDF here so we can take a look at it. This section is going to collect all real estate owned. If it happens to be a refinance transaction, that property is automatically going to print first, and it's going to collect the address, the property value, the status of the real estate, intended occupancy. This section of the application will collect the monthly insurance, taxes, and association dues if it's not included in a monthly mortgage payment. If your property is also a 2 to 4 unit primary or an investment property, it will collect any rental income. The gray section is reserved for the underwriters as they do their income analysis. If the property happens to have a creditor or first or second lien, it's going to list out the lien information. If our transaction is going to pay off that particular lien, you will see the indicator. This section of the application will expand based on how many properties your borrower owns. Moving into section 4, we're finally at the point where we're collecting information on the subject property and the loan information. So it lists out an estimated loan amount, the purpose of the transaction, address, number of units, and estimated property value. We're also collecting the occupancy type in this section, and the application is printing 2 new questions for us. This is the mixed use indicator and a manufactured home indicator. Section 4B is reserved for subordinate liens. If the property you're purchasing or refinancing will also have additional liens, they would be listed out in this section. 4C is for rental income, and this is for purchases only. It will flow through to the application automatically, but this would collect any rental income on the property that should be used for qualifying purposes. As we move into section 4D, this is the area that the borrower will disclose any gifts or grants they have received or will be receiving for this transaction. It will list out the gift or grant type, if it's been deposited or not, the source, and the estimated cash or market value. Section 5 is the declarations questions, and this is, to me, one of the biggest changes that we've seen. The questions have really been revamped. We're going to go over them here today, but I also encourage everybody to spend some time, reread them, make sure that you have a good understanding of them. So the very first one is very similar but has slightly changed. So will you occupy the property as your primary residence? So yes. Then what has changed slightly is, if yes, have you had an ownership property in another ownership interest, in another property in the last 3 years? So for example, if we're refinancing and that is the only real estate that the borrower owns, this would be yes and no if they don't own any other real estate. So just a slight change for us. Section or question B in this section is a brand new question to us, and it asks, if this is a purchase transaction, do you have a family relationship or a business affiliation with the seller of the property? We also have an expanded question here if you're borrowing money for the real estate transaction, and it breaks down, for example, are you borrowing money for the closing costs or down payment, obtaining any other money from another party, such as the seller or the realtor, that hasn't already been disclosed in the application? If the answer is yes, we would indicate how much. Question D, 1 and 2 is really digging into the borrower's anticipated financial picture as we move through the transaction. So it's asking the borrower if they will be applying for a mortgage on another property during this process. Question 2 is asking the borrower if they intend to apply for any other new credit during this process, such as installment loans or credit cards. So it's a great way to open that conversation and really dig into the borrower's financial intent. Question E is asking the borrower if they know if there is going to be another lien that would take priority over our mortgage during this process, and they give an example of a clean energy lien. Section, so this is still part of the deck questions, but it's broken out into a separate section here, which is all about the borrower's finances. So it asks the borrower if they are a cosigner or grantor on a loan. It then moves into, are there any outstanding judgments against you? Are you currently delinquent or default of federal debt? Question I has been slightly changed. Are you party to a lawsuit which will potentially have a personal financial liability? So just really trying to understand that up front. Then it goes into our property questions. So have you conveyed title to a property in lieu of foreclosure in the last 7 years? Within the past 7 years, have you completed a pre-foreclosure sale, a short sale, whereby the property was sold to a third party and the lender agreed to accept less than the outstanding balance? Have you had property foreclosed in the last 7 years? The bankruptcy question has been updated for the borrower to indicate what type of bankruptcy they completed or filed if it has happened in the last 7 years. So again, big changes to this area. Again, I recommend that you take some time and reread them. Section 6 is the acknowledgement section. This is where the borrower is going to sign and electronically date. This is the borrower agreeing that everything that they have given us is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge. It also gives them information based on that this type of loan, that the property is security or collateral for the loan, talks about appraisal and value, electronic records. I'm not going to spend time reading it out to you. At some point, you should read through it at least once so you are familiar with the information and can answer your borrower's questions. Section 7 is brand new to us. This is our military service indicator. This is where the borrower would indicate if they or a deceased spouse has ever served in the United States Armed Forces, or perhaps if they're currently serving. And if they are, they would check all that apply. Section 8 is the demographic information. This section hasn't changed, so I'm not going to spend any time on it. Section 9, this is reserved for the loan originator information that will automatically print an update for us as we move through the system. And this area here, this is that unmarried addendum I spoke about when we were reviewing on the first page. Just a quick reminder that it doesn't get completed if it's not applicable. So that was the review of the borrower information, or what I like to call part 1 in all 9 sections. We are now going to move into the lender loan information. So the very first section here, L1, is all about the property and the information. It indicates if it happens to be a community property state, transaction detail, project type if it's applicable, if it is a refinance, the type of refinance and refinance program, and if we have any kind of energy improvement. Title information will be collected in L2. It indicates how the property will be held and in what name. Section L3 is reserved for all of the loan information, what the borrower has applied for. So it lets them know the loan type, the amortization type, any special features that the loan may have. On the right-hand side, it breaks down the estimated interest rate, the term, and lien position. The bottom box is reserved for the proposed monthly payment, and we'll break it down in the PITIA format. Now, you might have noticed that we haven't reviewed the details of transaction section, and that is because it has been replaced with qualifying the borrower. Has a lot of the same detail that you're used to seeing. It's just presented in a format that's clean and clear for the borrower to review. This particular application happened to be a purchase application. So we see it has a sales contract price. It breaks down our closing costs in a lump sum amount. And it goes through the total amount due from borrower. And it breaks down our credits, so our loans, any seller credits, other credits that are applicable, total credits for the borrower. And then it does our addition and subtraction for us. And it breaks down the bottom line amount that the borrower would receive or needs to bring to closing. And that is the 4 sections of the lender loan information. This last page here, if your borrower has a financial picture that requires a continuation sheet, it would be printed in this section. And then one area that I want to point out here is section 5. It's a continuation from the declarations questions. And what this is, if your borrower said yes to any of the declarations questions and we are collecting their explanation, all the explanations will be printed in this area of 5B. The borrower will be prompted to sign and date this section of the application as well. That is the review and overview of the new application. Again, as a reminder, please take some time to review the declarations questions. We also highly recommend that you review the Fannie Mae material we sent out or the Gentworth. Great information breaking down the application again for you. Thank you for joining, and you have a wonderful day.